Hello, Pastor.
Hello.
Good to see everyone. Seemed like I just saw y'all 3 minutes ago. Good to see everyone. Good to see everybody.
Couple familiar faces.
All right. We want to welcome everybody to our monthly mental health ministry conversation. Ask everybody should be watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Do me a favor. Go ahead and share the post. There's somebody that you may be connected to that probably needs to hear the conversation that's happening tonight. I mean, it could literally save someone's life. And so do me a favor, do something very simple and just share the post. And I will be extremely appreciative. Uh, I want to now place you in the hands of one of the co-coordinators of our mental health ministry, Sister Roxalina Rawls.
Good evening, everyone. I don't see the screen here. Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, now I see the screen. Okay. First, giving honor to God and his authority. Welcome to our monthly mental health conversation. My name is Roxalina Rawls. I'm the co-coordinator of our Greater Bethel Mental Health Ministry. And thank you, Pastor, for another opportunity to serve. This ministry continues to grow and be a blessing to so many individuals. Pastor, I think we started in June or July of 2021. So we're going into our third year. Okay.
Good.
So I would like to, it's been a while. I would like to add at this time, most of us may be aware our dear sister, Evelyn Neely, has gone on to be with our Heavenly Father and has received her crown in glory. For those who would like to receive therapy through our mental health ministry, I just want you to know that we are available to assist and to help the process through the loss. You may contact our church or one of our coordinators directly. My topic for this discussion tonight is narcissistic personalities are sometimes found in abusive relationships. We may have heard the word narcissist used more and more these days in our society to describe the behavior of the personalities of celebrities, politicians, husbands, wives, parents, young adults, CEOs, ex-presidents, governors. Did I miss anyone? And a few whose mental health has been challenged in this manner. I would like to share some research and interesting facts in order that you may have a better understanding of this behavior and this psychological disorder. Narcissism is a pathological self-absorption by individuals who lack empathy for others. It's been around, believe it or not, for several centuries. However, it was first identified and diagnosed as a clinical mental disorder by a British physician, but not until 1898. An example of an individual who possessed these traits and was mentally challenged, but was unaware at that time, was Jezebel, a biblical character who lived in the 9th century BC before Christ. Queen Jezebel was the wife of King Ahab. My research shows that the narcissistic traits Jezebel possessed were synonymous with the Jezebel spirit. And these traits can exist even until this day in individuals who struggle in their personal and professional relationships. But as we review this information, let us be mindful a male can possess the Jezebel spirit just as well as the female. let's get started with a short video. It'll give us some concrete information for us to maybe start with. And then as I go through the presentation, I'll give you more information in terms of how an individual or how individuals may relate to others in relationships. So Pastor, the video, first video.
Way before the first selfie, the ancient Greeks and Romans had a myth about someone a little too obsessed with his own image. In one telling, Narcissus was a handsome guy wandering the world in search of someone to love. After rejecting a nymph named Echo, he caught a glimpse of his own reflection in a river and fell in love with it. Unable to tear himself away, Narcissus drowned. A flower marked the spot where he died, and we call that flower the narcissus. The myth captures the basic idea of narcissism, elevated and sometimes detrimental self-involvement. But it's not just a personality type that shows up in advice columns. It's actually a set of traits classified and studied by psychologists. The psychological definition of narcissism is an inflated, grandiose self-image. To varying degrees, narcissists think they're better looking, smarter, and more important than other people, and that they deserve special treatment. Psychologists recognize two forms of narcissism as a personality trait: grandiose and vulnerable narcissism. There's also narcissistic personality disorder, a more extreme form, which we'll return to shortly. Grandiose narcissism is the most familiar kind, characterized by extroversion, dominance, and attention-seeking. Grandiose narcissists pursue attention and power, sometimes as politicians, celebrities, or cultural leaders. Of course, not everyone who pursues these is narcissistic. Many do it for very positive reasons, like reaching their full potential or helping make people's lives better. But narcissistic individuals seek power for the status and attention that goes with it. Meanwhile, vulnerable narcissists can be quiet and reserved. They have a strong sense of entitlement, but are easily threatened or slighted. In either case, the dark side of narcissism shows up over the long term. Narcissists tend to act selfishly, so narcissistic leaders may make risky or unethical decisions, and narcissistic partners may be dishonest or unfaithful. When their rosy view of themselves is challenged, they can become resentful and aggressive. It's like a disease where the sufferers feel pretty good, but the people around them suffer. Taken to the extreme, this behavior is classified as a psychological disorder called narcissistic personality disorder. It affects 1 to 2% of the population, more commonly men. It is also a diagnosis reserved for adults. Young people, especially children, can be very self-centered, but this might just be a normal part of development. The 5th edition of the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual describes several traits associated with narcissistic personality disorder. They include a grandiose view of oneself, problems with empathy, a sense of entitlement, and a need for admiration or attention. What makes these traits a true personality disorder is that they take over people's lives and cause significant problems. Imagine that instead of caring for your spouse or children, you used them as a source of attention or admiration. Or imagine that instead of seeking constructive feedback about your performance, you instead told everyone who tried to help you that they were wrong. So what causes narcissism? Twin studies show a strong genetic component, although we don't know which genes are involved. But environment matters too. Parents who put their child on a pedestal can foster grandiose narcissism, and cold, controlling parents can contribute to vulnerable narcissism. Narcissism also seems to be higher in cultures that value individuality and self-promotion. In the United States, for example, narcissism as a personality trait has been rising since the 1970s, when the communal focus of the 60s gave way to the self-esteem movement and a rise in materialism. More recently, social media has multiplied the possibilities for self-promotion. Though it's worth noting that there's no clear evidence that social media causes narcissism. Rather, it provides narcissists a means to seek social status and attention. So can narcissists improve on those negative traits? Yes. Anything that promotes honest reflection on their own behavior and caring for others, like psychotherapy or practicing compassion towards others, can be helpful. The difficulty is, it can be challenging for people with narcissistic personality disorder to keep working at self-betterment. For a narcissist, self-reflection is hard from an unflattering angle.
Thank you, Pastor. That's a broad view in terms of narcissism. And I just would like to focus on on some more specifics. First, again, the definition, according to our DSM, which is our official manual of our psychiatric association, narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, is a pattern of grandiose self-importance and a lack of empathy, which typically begins in early adult. It can start as early as 7 or 8 when a person or a child is 7 or 8 years old. Next slide, Pastor. According to the statistics, about 0.5, that's 1 out of 200 in the United States, will suffer from these traits. 75% are men. More young adults, that's between the ages of 20 to 34, 8.9%, and older adults, 50 plus, 4.4%. More, according to the statistics, more common in African Americans, 12.5%, Hispanic, 7.5%, and white, 5.5%. And I would just like to add a disclaimer to those statistics. Keep in mind that was reported. What is actually out there is not necessarily true according to those statistics. Single, 9.6%, divorced, separated, 7.3%, and married individuals, 4.9%. Next slide. Where does it begin? Children begin to evaluate themselves by how they are perceived by others. Comes partly down to genes and also impacted by their environment. If a child grows up with a loving, warm, and supportive parents who take an active interest in their lives, the child is more likely to think that they are innately worthy. If the child is brought up by parents who are over-exaggerate the child's quality, praising them for everything superficial, the child will think they are superior to others, a core belief of all narcissists. Parents engage superficially with the child, they will also be dealing with a major attachment dysfunction, resulting in traumatic rupture of the child's psyche. Next slide. A child doesn't get their emotional needs met. If the child doesn't get their emotional needs met, the subliminal message, their needs are not that important. That's what they begin to feel. Productive tool of and use or block them out altogether, numbing themselves for feelings they will keep the discontent and isolation, stopping child or adult from being able to form a healthy relationships and feel worthy of their values. The link between the two is a child could have been raised by a narcissistic parent. Next slide. Here's a short video, 7 traits of narcissism, and our video guest is Dr. Rami.
So, Roxy, before we do the video, those stats are confusing to me based on the definition, because I don't understand how a group that has been denied access to power has a higher rate of narcissism than groups that walk in that supposed power in the United States. I don't understand how those numbers came out.
And that was my first thoughts too. And that's why I've added the disclaimer. I don't believe with that. However, as I said, that's what was reported. We pretty much know what the facts, what the true facts are. That was reported. Everybody does not report that in. And my belief is probably just the opposite, and the opposite being even higher for those that are of non-color. So that was my first response. When I saw that, that was my first response. Totally agree.
So do you think, because I guess these are professional diagnoses, but I know that sometimes confidence of people who are not supposed to have access to power, that confidence, like you say this angry black woman, or this I think sometimes when people will look at confidence and misdiagnose the true personalities of black people, because we're actually, the way the system is set up, we're not supposed to have that type of confidence. Do you think there could be some misdiagnosis of what's being referred to as narcissism, as it relates to black people who probably should be the least people that think that they have this power?
Depends on who's diagnosing them. And in order to meet that criteria, there's 9 or 10, and you have to qualify for at least 5. But the only person that can diagnose is the person.
Like Roxy dropped off. Hopefully she'll be back on. And I know there's no way where I can answer that question. Dale, do you have an opinion on that question that I just asked? You're muted.
Okay, did I lose you? I see we're having a storm out here on the lake, and it's going in and out. It says Ron has started screen sharing.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah,
okay, I don't see it.
Pastor had asked me to comment pretty much on the statistics part, how we as Black people need to probably feel for our own personal self-esteem and lifestyle, that we are important because we've been put down in society. So that is true. I don't know about the numbers, just like they think that there's more African-American men and women in prison than white. If you go to the prison, there's a whole lot of them there too. So that part could be a myth. But what Roxy was getting on is what makes it a real diagnosis is their frequency and intensity and the onset of it. And when she was saying those numbers, I understood, but so many of those things have to happen for it to be considered a legitimate disorder. And I don't know, I can pull out my DSM, how many of those would apply. And it's general. Now, the second thing I'm gonna say, we know that all of these statistics probably did not have a large sample of our community. So you have to weigh it somewhat.
Okay. All right, Roxy, are you connected back with us? All right, she dropped off, but I'm gonna go ahead and play the video. And Dale, you might have to be ready to step in.
I will. Okay.
Okay.
You say there are 7 signs of narcissism, and you're also going to tell us how to spot them. Let's just go through them one by one. What's the first one?
So the first one's lack of empathy. And that's a defining characteristic of narcissism. In fact, if I see that somebody has really well-preserved empathy, I'm like, nah, not even happening. So that to me almost is the requirement. It's the bedrock of this pattern. The second is entitlement. Entitlement is that sense is that somehow someone should deserve special treatment, even if it's to the detriment of other people, that somehow they are different than everyone else. Again, sort of special by dint of their existence. The third is grandiosity. It's sort of an unrealistic assessment of one's capacity or abilities, or they talk about a grandiose world that they don't even live in, the things that they may someday do. You know, someday I'm gonna climb Mount Everest. So they talk about it as though it's something they're actively doing or have already done. So it is, again, a very unrealistic, almost fantasy-like version of the world. They'll often talk about having one day the greatest love affair or the greatest love story or the greatest wedding or the greatest career. Everything is just bigger and larger than life. Number 4 is superficiality. There's a very vapid quality to narcissism. They're really only concerned about appearances, how a person looks, what a person owns, where they live, what they drive, what they carry, the shoes on their feet. It's very, very superficial to the detriment of other characteristics. Somebody out there might say, oh, but I love fashion, but they're a very sweet, kind person. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about superficiality with absolutely no depth behind it, or judging people solely on superficial characteristics and quality. Number 5 is chronic seeking of admiration or validation. It's the constant need to be receiving praise, recognition, and nowadays that's really amped up because of social media, that they have to get likes and they have to get lots of traction on their social media page and they need lots of followers and all of that. So it's that constant need, but it never stops. If you're even close to them, like you're their child or you're their partner, you have to constantly be telling them how wonderful they are and how great they are, and way beyond the thing that they've done. It's almost a nuisance to get a gift from a narcissist because you have to thank them for it so many times. It would have been easier to buy it yourself. Number 6 is their tendency to rage. They don't have good command of their emotions. They tend to be all over the map, and the one emotion they tend to manifest the most often is uncontrolled rage. That's often because they're so frustrated and they're so insecure, and they don't have good ways of dealing with their feelings. So it's not unusual for them to just come out. When things don't go their way, they don't have any tolerance for frustration. So you'll see a lot of rage that comes out. And number 7, I'd really say, is arrogance. It's, I'm better than you. And in some ways that sort of draws from the grandiosity, it draws from the entitlement, but it can come off as a snobbery, as a dismissiveness, as a devaluation, as an invalidation of other people, just sort of like sweeping them away. And so those are some of the 7 key characteristics. In my book, I actually lay out what I call 31 characteristics. It's like, I think it's a lot more than just the 7, and it takes in a lot more territory. Jealousy, envy, getting pleasure out of other people's misery, lying, cheating, things, a lot of really negative interpersonal patterns. People who are narcissistic often engage in projection. They make their faults and flaws yours. Like, I didn't say that, I didn't do that, you did. They'll accuse you of something they did, and they'll be, you'll often be quite confused. They engage in dynamics like gaslighting, where they question your reality and make you feel like you're literally losing your mind. Like, that never they'll say things like, that never happened, and you'll be like, but it did. And then you'll start questioning yourself.
Did that happen? Right.
And people who spend enough time with narcissists find themselves plagued with self-doubt because narcissists so often question their reality.
So with those 7, do they have to have all 7 of those?
The DSM has a list of 9, which takes in most of those. You only need 5 of the 9, plus this idea that life isn't going well, that distress, to get it in the DSM. I'm actually a little more generous. I say, like, you need to have, like, if you have 5 of those 7, you're in trouble. But the lack of empathy is the requirement. To me, everything. So it's like that plus 4 or 5 others, and not so good.
And huge takeaway for me was in our last episode when you talk about empathy and how it related to raising your kids. So if you haven't seen that episode, make sure you go back one and take a look there, because that was just absolutely, for me, phenomenal. How quickly, if I'm just at a party and I meet people, can I find out if someone's a narcissist?
I mean, I'm a pro and I'm in and out in 15 seconds. Like I got this.
15
Like,
seconds.
I got this. Like before I even got into the second bite of the pretzel.
Our session is going to be 15 seconds.
You can, what it is at a party, it's almost easier, right? Because I know it's kind of mean. I probably like cast out a few. It might take me longer. Some people, if they're a narcissist, you're going to be able to tell quickly. Sometimes it takes you a little longer if it's a bit more subtle or covert or something like that. But it can happen pretty quickly. Watch the back and forth of the conversation. Is there a genuine curiousness about you? Like, do you walk up to them and say, "Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Romany," and you'll say, "Hi, I'm Kyle," and then it's the Kyle show. And by the time this conversation is done, there's no sense of anything about me and not even an opportunity for me to have offered that. It also might be how they conduct themselves in that. Like, do they just keep talking about themselves and only in these sort of unrealistically glowing terms? Do they almost seem too, but at the other extreme, they also may be a little bit too slick and too smooth. Like, maybe not like they're coming on to you, but like it's just almost too charming. I find charming people terrifying. Because I know that's often like the soft sign that psychopathy or narcissism's coming around the corner. So charming people, I actually like uncharming people. Like the more socially awkward you are, the more I'm like, this could be a real, sure thing.
Real
Like this is
person.
great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Sign me up.
So if I meet somebody and I suspect they're a narcissist because they're only talking about themselves, they're not interested in me at all, they're very grandiose in their the content that they're putting out there. Are there any questions I could ask them that could give me some instant feedback?
What you can do is ask them something that has more, that pulls them away from talking about their work. Like, let's say they're bragging about work. They're sort of like only talking about one thing. Try to change it to something else. Like, what are the things that bring you joy? Like, really ask them like a feely question. And then if they're like, blah, 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 like they just sort of like become like, huh? Feeling? I'm going to go get another martini. Like they run away. That's probably a sign. Like it's sort of a game for me at a party. If I think I've met a narcissist, I'll say, "Can you tell me a little bit about your inner world?"
Yeah.
Because I know what you do now. And I'll often get people who look at me like I'm speaking in tongues, and they'll often say, "I see someone over there. I gotta go." And they'll often really cut the conversation.
People are going to be so nervous when they meet you at a party now. They're like, "Hey, by the way, I'm not a narcissist. I saw you on that circle."
Like, I'm out. I'm not.
That's also a show I would definitely watch. You with a hidden camera, just meeting
At a
people.
party. Yeah. In LA, it's actually it's blood sport here.
Oh my
'cause
God, it's just fishing with dynamite.
Well, it's like
here.
it's like seashell collecting.
Yeah.
By the end of a party, you've got enough.
I mean, it really, I know we joke about how narcissistic LA is, but it really is true.
It really is true.
Yeah, we
I
live
hate to
here,
say
we
it.
work here. It's
a mothership.
insanity.
It really is.
Yeah.
But here's one thing that you want to be. I mean, again, I don't want people dismissing people in like the first 15 seconds they meet them. Let's say someone does talk about themselves a lot. The other thing you do want to be mindful of is they may be socially anxious. So they may have trouble kind of taking and rolling with it. That's why I'm saying if you could slow the conversation down, maybe even make it about something that's happening around you, like something very sweet, like something that they're drinking or something special they may be wearing, but making them make it more special, not like, well, this is the designer label, but try to make it about the moment, what's personal, and see where they can go with it, to share a little of yourself. Also, start talking about yourself a little. They've done their whole dog and pony show. See what happens when you start talking about yourself. If they glaze over or they start using their phone at that point, not a good sign.
If I do find myself in a situation where I'm in a relationship, whether it's romantic or otherwise, with a narcissist, what can I do?
Well, that's here it's gonna be painful. If you really, and by the time a lot of people detect these patterns, it's been years sometimes. If we're lucky, they don't have kids together, because that can start getting messy if the relationship goes south. Because a custody battle with a narcissist it's war. It's one of the most painful things I've ever witnessed. If you sense that that's where things are going, you need to get yourself into therapy right away, and you want to get the couple into therapy. The challenge with couples therapy with a narcissist is unless you've got one very skilled therapist, that narcissist can really play the therapist. And I've seen that happen many, many times. You want to be really, really careful.
How do they play the therapist?
They win them over, they charm them. And sometimes the narcissist is sort of the more materially successful or the more successful seeming partner, and they'll kind of, again, they'll charm them. They'll charm them. You have to be somebody who just dislikes charm to really not be charmed, right? So they'll really play them and work them and flatter them. And narcissists actually are quite good at sort of sniffing out how to validate another person because they need it so much. They're really good at dispensing it when they need to.
Wow.
So they can really work the game. But it's important you get therapy, you consider getting yourselves into therapy, you pay attention to the patterns, and you really have to do some hard looks into the mirror on if this is as good as it's ever going to get, which is probably the case, can you live with this forever? That's the question. And if you don't like that, then you've got one of two paths. Either you got to adjust your expectations to this is how it's always going to be, or you got to get out.
Well, and those two paths is what we will be discussing in our next episode of this fascinating series all about narcissism.
Okay, let's pause for a moment. A lot of information. Any comments or any questions?
I got a bunch.
Okay, let me hear 'em.
So the beginning definition and then those 7 traits I just went to 2 total spectrums. So beginning definition, I kind of thought about, okay, narcissism is kind of what I thought it was. But then when I heard those 7 traits, I almost looked at narcissism as something that was caused by trauma. When I looked at those traits, it really seemed like trauma could have caused that, because then I began to think about those numbers that I just talked about and a lack of empathy. And, we think about, the culture that we live in. And when I spent the time I spent out at the schools watching the kids interact and some of the stuff our kids post on social media. And then sometimes, just you kind of see somebody, you see a murder or something like on the news and people just standing around watching. No one will say, I mean, it just seems like a lack of empathy. People watch people get hurt, don't have empathy, a sense of entitlement. I know that's something that we preach against, that something that hurts us as a people, this grandiosity to where everything's got to be big. You got to show everybody you got something. You do everything so big. Superficiality. There's a lot of things that I'm seeing, and we're saying you only have to have 5 out of the 9. She shared 7, and I'm thinking that I can see something that trauma, behavior that was caused by trauma in people's lives that could be seen as narcissism. And yeah, that's kind of where my mind is right now.
I can understand that. And, going back to the comments that I made earlier, we're talking in a lot of these are broad examples. The only way that it can be determined is individually. And like you said, someone's life in terms of they may have had a lot of trauma at a very young age. And not being able to become a young adult and still trying to, on their own, trying to process through that. And some of the things that they were exposed to very early on, that has stuck with them. And their behavior may have taken that type of route in terms of how they handle different things with family members in a relationship. And it may vary with another person. They may be in an entirely different type of how they were raised or a different type of environment. So you have to look at each situation and each person separately. There's no one exactly the same or have experienced the same things that another person had in a lifetime. So we can't take it as a group, a group of individuals. Society's they like to label because you're in a certain group or you lived in a certain area or you grew up in a certain town, that automatically that label is placed on you. I don't know if that has answered or any of your questions or kind of zeroed it in. We're talking about in broad terms and generally, but looking at each individual separately.
Yeah, no, I'm just receiving information that just my view was kind of changed a little bit to where it's like, wow, this is this horrible person or this bad person to, wow, this is a hurting person.
You said you said a bad person or a hurt person?
So I think before, you know, when I hear the words narcissistic, I think this is arrogant, this is a bad person, not really a good person. But just kind of hearing the conversation and the things, the traits, it's like this. I feel kind of sorry for this person. This person might be hurting.
Exactly.
I agree.
Exactly.
I agree with
Exactly.
I agree with you. You know, it's like the class clown or the kid that, you know, wants to be, you know, seen in class, that kid's doing that for some other reason that they go to a stream. But the bottom line of could be uh unset, unresolved trauma that occurred somewhere in their life, even before the child is old enough to remember it. And a lot of times in therapy, you know, they have to go back before they recognize that they can remember things to find out the root of it. And another trait that I've seen in a lot of narcissistic people, that they are above and beyond everyone else. They place themselves at a higher level. They got
Yeah.
the big boat, or they have the highest paying job, or that they have to make themselves feel on a pedestal somewhere other than the reality. And we've seen people, and unfortunately, another trait is they can be really, really big liars.
And then to bring that into, here's that individual, then to bring that into a relationship or marriage where that, you know, they have those traits or characteristics or behavior, and here you are with another person. What happens at that particular time? And then to add to that, if there are children in the household, what effect that they may have on the next generation.
It's but it seems to me that they're not creating not creating narcissists because they're putting everybody down. So they're not setting up on a pedestal. They're not, you know, telling them they're this great person. They're probably putting people down. So it doesn't seem like they're too likely to create another narcissist because they might create somebody that's on the other end of the spectrum because of how they treat them at their, you know, I think one thing said they lift them and does something for themselves at other people's expense. But it's because when you're in the relationship, it seems that, okay, I'm in this relationship, I'm in this marriage, and so I just can't deal with it, I'm gone. And it seems like that's gonna, yeah, you're good, and so you're good. But that narcissist, that's more trauma. That's probably, I think that person is on a suicide trajectory, because when you leave and that hurt happens, it's probably gonna make them even worse. So
Absolutely.
it's, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Or you could have, and later on it says, you could have a, you know, more than one a child in that family where that parent will elevate one and the other child or children see this, and it may have a negative effect on them, you know, indirect. You think you're elevating that one child, but then you're hurting that other child or children as well. So it can affect, it can be an infection to infect, you know, the whole family.
Wow.
Yeah. Any other comments? And I love those comments. Again, giving us all a better understanding of narcissism. Any other comments or questions?
I have
Okay.
a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Which characteristic do you think is the worst? Is it a lack of empathy? I was wondering, you know, when we try to build our kids up give them confidence, affirmations. Is there any danger of that leading to narcissistic behavior?
I think that you have to be real. Well, let me just back up. Each parent should have a relation with their child that they know their children. And I think it would depend on that particular child, what you say to them and how you say that to them, and what type of relationship have you established with that child? Have you been truthful with that child? If that child has done something that is unacceptable, do you tell that child, oh, that's great, that's wonderful, and you still continue to elevate them or puff them up? Or are you truthful with them and tell them how you feel? So yes, to have empathy for an individual, that's important. Yeah, I feel that that's important in any child or any human being's life. But it depends on that relationship that you have with that child. You can't, you don't, I don't think you raise each child the same way. Each child has their own personality, characteristics.
I can really see how there can be some misdiagnosis of narcissism, because some of this stuff is, I think that Irma was talking about, some of this stuff is stuff that we try to make sure that we make up the difference in, because of the trauma that's been suffered in our community, and we try to kind of empower and make our children feel that, you know, I could see some serious misdiagnosis, and then that makes sense to me, to where in the beginning, how can Black people, based on the definition I heard in front, be the highest percentage? But if this is how you diagnose it, a lot of this, some of this stuff is stuff that's caused by trauma, and then we go and try to reinforce because we don't want our children to feel that they're not deserving. We don't want our children to, and so I don't know, but I think it's everything you're saying. I agree that it's we have a real fine line to walk, because we don't want to have the sense of entitlement. We don't want to be superficial. We don't want to have this tendency to rage. We don't want to be arrogant, but at the same time, we got that thin line between arrogance and confidence. We there's stuff that we just can't. We're not going to get support and encouragement naturally. So I don't know.
So that's why we have to do it within. Irma, was your question answered?
Yes. Well, kind of. I was just wondering if it's walking a tightrope, because you want to instill confidence in your kids and have them do affirmations. Yes, you're smart. Don't let anybody body shame you. Be confident in who you are. Not take offense of somebody else's opinion of you. So I was wondering, do these affirmations, would that border on a narcissistic behavior? That's why I said, which one do you think was the behavior that's really, really bad? I would think a lack of empathy would be a sure sign.
I agree.
Sister Roxana, before you move forward, could you explain to me what she just, can you hear me?
Yes.
Could you explain to me that word what she used, so I don't know the definition of the word Sister Irma just used, and then maybe to help me understand what was just said. The definition of what the word she just used.
Affirmation? What word are you speaking of?
The lack of empathy?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. That you don't, it's all about you. You don't care about what happens to the other guy or the other girl. As long as I'm okay, it doesn't matter that this other person may be, let's say, without, that they need help. That's their problem. I don't,
No, that's good. That's good.
yeah,
I got it.
you don't have feelings towards another human being.
So you just all the way selfish. It's
You're,
all about you.
it's all as it came up on the screen. Me.
You guys,
It's all about whatever I do is for the betterment of me. It's not to help others. It's not about my spouse. It's not about my children. It's about me. I'm the number one. I'm the most important person. I should have all the attention, accolades. I'm great. Does that help you? Okay. Well, I'm just mindful of time. I want to move on because there's some other things, and maybe as we listen to some other videos and have further discussion, maybe this will bring it home. In slide 8, in a relationship. So here we're talking about not just yourself, but another person or individuals. How do you know if an abuser is a narcissist? A survivor can tell they are in a relationship with a narcissist, an abuser, if the abuser never admits fault or takes responsibility for anything. Next slide. Characteristics of a narcissistic abuser. They use gaslighting to make a survivor believe that their memories of an event are inaccurate or blown out of proportion. And do we all know what gaslighting is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. 2, tend to get very angry and walk out of a counseling session. If there's a couple counseling, will not stop abuser. Abuser must work on their own problem. And the woman said in the video, the person that is a narcissist, they're a charmer. They're able to turn things around and maybe make that counselor feel it's not my problem, it's the spouse's problem. Number 3, shame victims about anything from their accomplishments to their various trauma that they suffered, insinuating they deserved it somehow. 4, often stay cool, calm, and collected, sometimes even amused when their partner is visibly distraught. Project their faults and wrongdoings onto a victim, such as blaming their partner for lying or cheating when it's actually the abuser who's doing the things. Change the subject in conversation in order to evade any accountability, also known as turning the blame back onto something that the victim did instead of even if it's not relevant. Next slide. Have circular, nonsensical, and seemingly never-ending conversations in order to frustrate their victim to the point where they are more likely to give up. And I love this one, which there is a very common thing, love bombing. A victim showering with the grand gestures of affection and attention only to begin tearing the person down, their self-image or esteem. Later on, the victim craves the original amount of administrative admiration back, beginning a dangerous cycle of psychological abuse. So Before I show this next video, just want to go with the differences between a male and a female characteristics, what their traits are. As far as appearance, use their gaining authority. This would be the female, obsessed with appearance, resulting sometimes in plastic surgery. As far as the male, in terms of appearance, combine attractiveness with charm. Seduction. For the female, use charm to seduce a mate. Use provocative clothes. For a male, use charm to entice a mate. In terms of confidence, narcissists cover the deep-rooted insecurities with a belief that they are special. Women gain their poise from comparing their superiority over others. They feel good about themselves when others are beneath them, their own standards. And for a male, self-confidence, giving the assurance from within, as though nobody else is really important or care about anyone else. Money, the love of money is strong for narcissists, as they believe money gives them power, control, success, status, and dominance over others. For the female, enjoy excessive shopping. For the male, occupied with obtaining money at all costs, even if it involves stealing from their own family members. Fidelity. For the female, acts like the black widow spider, idolizing their mate to attract them and emasculate them after they draw them into a relationship. And for the male, tend to be a serial adulterer. For children, narcissists like to share, raise baby narcissists. Often they pick a favorite child and focus all their efforts and attention on that child. The other children are left inadequate and unworthy and insecure. Females. The females view their children as an extension of themselves. Even when the child is an adult, everything the child accomplishes is the reflection of their superior parenting. For the male, in terms of children, generally view children as nonsense or nuisance, frequently comparing that they, not the children, should have the attention more so than their spouse or their partner. And competition. For the female, females battle with other females for the dominance. And for the male, they treat other males as their rivals. So those are some of the traits in comparison, female versus male. So this next video talks about, this is a young woman who enjoyed the struggle in a marriage. She was close to 10 years, she and her husband were married. She channeled those thoughts and pain, and she wrote a book to bring eternal peace. So this is how she dealt with the situation in being in a marriage with a narcissist. So Pastor, could you, could we view that video?
If you have someone in your life who has narcissistic personality disorder, then you know how his or her behavior can impact the lives of everyone around them in great and small ways. But often, it's the spouse of the person with the disorder who suffers the most. Katina McHenry knows far too well what that experience is like, and that's why she's turned it into a book to help others reclaim their lives. It's aptly called Married to a Narcissist. Katina, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here because a lot of people are experiencing this, but they can't quite put their finger on it.
Yes.
So narcissism. A lot of people think that it is just taking a lot of selfies, thinking I'm so beautiful, a lot of vanity, but it's a lot deeper than that,
Yes, it goes beyond just simple vanity and paying attention to your looks. It is a personality disorder where the person is constantly manipulative. They are verbal abusers, they are psychological abusers, they are mental abusers, and they're very manipulative. So they will manipulate situations so that everything somehow comes back to them and everything is about them. And it's in every relationship they have, whether it's with their spouse, at work, or even with their children. They don't do things for the sake of other people. They do things that benefit themselves. And they will only involve themselves in situations that will somehow benefit them. If it has nothing to do with them, they don't want to be involved in that situation. And then they make you feel guilty for that particular thing.
And it is a disorder.
Yes.
It's something that is clinically diagnosed. So I think people don't want to necessarily believe that. They just think that the person is being manipulative just because that's just the way that they are. But it is something that is clinically wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is a series of them being enabled in some way. And they only surround themselves with people who won't disagree with them, people who will tell them they're doing nothing wrong. And they also don't have the ability to self-examine. They won't look inside and say, oh, maybe I was wrong, and they won't apologize for things that you point out to them as well. So it's a very difficult relationship to have with someone who is a narcissist.
And so you wrote this book because you experienced this firsthand.
Yes, I was married. Yes, I was married for almost 10 years, and I was, from the beginning, from when we were first married, I started journaling because there were so many experiences that I was going through. And as a writer and a journalist, that was where I sort of put my expression and put my pain, because I didn't know how to talk about what was happening. And I didn't even know how to describe it, because some of the situations were so shocking and so outrageous. It was unbelievable that those things were happening to me. So after journaling for years, last summer I looked at all of the content and the material that I had and realized, oh my gosh, that's a lot of content. Do I do something with that? What do I do with it? So I started reading back, and that was probably the most excruciating part, was reading back some of the personal experiences. Yes, and that was the most painful thing, because it was a realization of how could a person be so strategically mean and hateful and evil to another human being.
But you channeled through that pain.
Yes.
You wrote this book in an effort to help others. And I know that you have some practical tips that people who are experiencing this can use.
Yes. So the first half is my journal entries, which are very raw and very pure. And the second half is just how to deal with the narcissist. And really, and this goes, this is practical for people who are married to one, maybe even dating one, and trying to understand what's happening and also understand if this is a relationship they should be in. So I talk about different ways, and I give different scenarios that are general scenarios about how to handle a person, how to handle the exchange that you have with the narcissist.
I think that's really important, because nowadays we're hearing more and more about narcissism, whether it's with celebrities or politicians or co-workers or what have you. So the tips that you have in this book, it stems beyond romantic relationships. We can use that in everyday lives?
Absolutely, because people are married to one, people have parents that are narcissists, people work with narcissists, and then once you understand their behavior, you can better understand how to deal with them and how to separate yourself, because really that's the only way to bring some internal peace back to your life.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for writing this book and for being here. If you want to check it out, go to Amazon.com and anywhere books are sold. We'll be right back with more Midday Maryland right after the break.
Okay. Any comments? Questions?
I think it was very interesting that Sister Roxalina, because it almost reminded me of a study we did in Revelation with all them different churches, and which church do you identify where you fall in at, and I fall in, look like a category there, and it was just something that really kind of I opened my eyes from what I'm hearing. Like I maybe got a little TT narcissism in me. I say TT.
Okay.
That's just a little bit.
Okay. Well, I know it, it's a lot of information. Some may apply.
Yeah, it is.
But
I ain't by my you.
But may help you to individuals to identify maybe where they're at, or where they're at in relationships, with your family, with your children, with employers. This is pretty broad. This is a pretty broad subject. And I know a lot to digest, but just to present it and make you aware of it, because like I said at the top of the presentation, this is a term that is used quite frequently. And, and I would say in a lot of cases, people don't even know what we're talking about, but it's a pretty broad subject. And again, this is just to provide you with information that may be helpful, may be able to identify some behaviors in relationships, and take it. If you can use it, fine. If not, you move on. So I just want to close with, this is, I always like to hear from Dr. Judith Joseph. She always gives a nice broad review. And the last video is how to break up with that narcissist if you're in a relationship. And as I said in some of the material, sometimes you think it's you, but maybe it's not you. So Pastor, if you can play that final video. And
the holiday season should be joyful, merry, and bright, and some people believe adopting a pet is the key to achieving those feelings. Thanks for staying with us tonight. I'm Tamsin Fidel.
I'm Corey Chambers in for Aaron E. And the family get-togethers, holiday parties, increase responsibility financially, can increase feelings of sadness, loneliness, depression, anxiety, you name it. But adopting or fostering a pet in need can really help deal with those feelings if your family is ready for the responsibility, of course.
Yeah, well, joining us now to talk more about it all is Josie Miller.
Okay, this is Dr. Judith Joseph, how to break up with the narcissist. Not your dog, if you are in a relationship. Let's see if we can locate that. I thought it was on the, it's PIX News. Yeah, let's see.
Go ahead and talk. That is PIX News, but it's the wrong article.
It's the wrong one. Okay, it's Dr. Judith Joseph is the person's name. So while we're waiting for Pastor to locate that, any other comments?
Roxy, I was listening carefully to the description of being married to a narcissist, and I was thinking about the characteristics. And I know this is a very serious subject, and I don't want to be facetious, but if you think back in the day, these traits, these characteristics just sounded like some players, some moves that they did.
You're right. No, you're right.
And, we didn't think of them being narcissists, just they were being players. Those were some of the things that they did.
Yeah, charming. Yes, absolutely. And
gaslighting, making you think that what you knew and what you saw wasn't really it,
Yes.
And then if they got caught into something, they tried to make it seem like it was your fault.
Yes. Yes.
So Pastor Ross, we were calling you and Cornbread players when actually you were just budding narcissists.
That's what I'm saying. Y'all didn't get it.
And maybe all of us have a little bit of it.
Breakups can be emotionally.
That's what I was saying, just a little bit. Rev Ross was full blown.
All right, I think I got it now. But I appreciate you bringing that up because they just misunderstood us, Cornbread. That's what it was. We was misunderstood, and but we've been delivered now. We've been delivered.
Amen.
Okay.
There you go.
Draining, and for people who are ending things with a narcissist, saying goodbye can be a challenge, but knowing what to expect can help.
Thank you for staying with us. I'm Erin LeBeau.
And I'm Tamsin Fidel. Well, leaving a narcissist can be a painful process depending on how the other person reacts. One psychiatrist is helping people through the steps with her TikTok videos. Dr. Judith Joseph joining us now with her tips to cope after a divorce or breaking up with a narcissist. Nice to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start on. I've seen a lot of your videos, and you talk about this. After a breakup, a former partner may ask you not to tell anybody out of respect for their privacy. And it sounds innocent enough, right? But how can this go terribly wrong?
It's really important to realize that narcissistic people really care about their self-image, how they're perceived. And so when they ask you not to talk about the relationship, it's more so to protect themselves. But this can backfire because behind your back, they'll go and tell everyone their version of what happened, their twisted narrative. And that leaves you feeling unsupported and exposed and also betrayed.
Okay, so if this happens to someone, what can they do?
It's really important to make sure you have allies, that you talk to your family, they talk to your friends. In these type of toxic relationships, the partner will discourage this. They'll say, your friends are jealous of me. Don't tell them this, don't tell them that. And it's really a tactic to divide and conquer so that they have you all to themselves and that they maintain the power and control. And, you know, when this happens to people, you feel ashamed, so you don't want to talk about it. That shame can actually hurt you. It's important to share when you're feeling hurt and you're feeling exploited in a relationship, because that way you get support.
Yeah, I can imagine feeling very isolating too. So is it worth it to try to get your side of the story out there, or do you just kind of say, I'm going to let it go and walk away?
We have to remember that a lot of people with narcissistic personality disorder can be very aggressive. So on a case-by-case basis, you have to be careful. In cases of domestic violence, you want to consult with, domestic violence support groups or specialists, or even sometimes law enforcement. In other cases, it's really important, if you know the person's not violent, to reach out to your family and friends for help. Again, when people mistreat you, you feel ashamed, so you don't talk about what's happening, but it's really important to get support.
All right, expanding on that, you just mentioned a narcissist can get aggressive after a breakup. What are some examples, and how can someone protect themselves?
In my practice, I've seen so many cases of people using pets as tools of manipulation. And, people know that, with a pet, it's almost like a bond, like having a child. And so when you're deciding to leave a narcissist, you have to think about the things in your household that you share that are really a sentimental value to you, including your pets, and think about getting out safely before, that narcissist can use those objects against you.
You really have to have a plan there. So let me ask you this. Another possible situation is if you have an ex that gets passive aggressive, which we hear about a lot. So what would that look like, and then what can you do about it?
In some of these relationships, you share finances, you share credit cards, you share bills. And I've seen cases where people will do passive aggressive things like they won't pay a bill on time to ruin both of your credit. Remember, narcissists really care about how they're viewed. And if they feel shame because you left them, they don't care. They're going to burn the house down. If it ruins your credit and it ruins theirs, they don't care. They just want to hurt you.
Okay, so after breaking it off with a narcissist, you might be thriving, but your ex may be still trying to hold you down. So is it possible to escape that negativity, and can it ever be dangerous?
It can be dangerous. And, with narcissistic love, the person views you as an object. And if their bright and shiny object looks even brighter without them, that can be enraging. And so they may stalk you online. They may create ghost accounts and try to, troll you. So you have to be prepared for these things when you're dealing with someone this toxic.
All right, so let me ask you this, because I think this is the ultimate question. How do you know if you're actually getting involved with a narcissist to begin with? Are they marriage material? I would say not, right?
They can be quite charming and also very good looking. Remember, these are people that thrive on being praised.
Sure.
And they feel entitled. And so they really do go after people who, at first they love bomb. And that's a fancy way of saying they'll shower you with presents, they'll, treat you well, they'll talk you up in front of your family and friends. They'll win everyone over, but it's all a manipulation, because remember, they really care about themselves. Yep. So, eventually that table will turn and they'll start to belittle you and disparage you. And then you feel that, negative cycle of abuse.
So since they are all about themselves, is it possible to change them?
You know, in my practice, I've seen very few cases of people who say, I'm a narcissist and I want help. And usually in those cases, you know, they're at this crossroad where they're either going to lose their family, their job, there's something dire happening. But in most cases, you know, if you can get away with this behavior and be entitled and grandiose and mistreat people and you enjoy it, then you're not going to change.
Dr. Joseph, thanks for being with us. I think so much important information, and we're hearing that word more and more these days. To follow your tips and to see your social media videos on the topic, you can follow online at Dr. Judith Joseph on TikTok and also Instagram. Nice to have you.
Okay. I know we're over time, but I just want to know any more comments, questions from anyone?
That's why it's good. That's why it's good to have a mental health ministry. And so when the pastor can't tell somebody to get a divorce, I'll just sit on the Roxy, Dale, and John.
Oh my. Well, I hope that this has been informative, and that was my intent, you know, to give you information and have time to discuss it, digest it, and if it applies to you, to someone you know, at least maybe you have a little bit more understanding, and maybe you'll be able to maybe help that individual or individuals. So, Pastor, I'll give you the last word. Oh, and here we have Dale George Harris. I like to list individuals that are locally that for mental health counseling. If you know of someone that would be interested or feel that they may need it, here's Dale George Harris's information on the screen. So, Pastor, I'll let you have the final word.
As usual, wonderful conversation, and I've learned a lot.
Okay, all righty.
All right, so we want to thank everybody. Go ahead.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and enjoy your evening.
All right, thank you. Go ahead and share this post.
Informative.
Thank you, Ron.
Very.
Welcome.
Very. But you all make sure you share this post, because I know there's some people out there that are in tough situations that need some information, and there was a lot of good information that shared, and sometimes you can't fix people. Sometimes it has to take a supernatural disaster for them to be fixed, but you can't allow yourself to be destroyed in the process. And so good information. And see you all. Our Real Talk Bible study is in person tomorrow. We will do it. We'll offer the virtual, but we'll be in person and having a meal together. So God bless you and have a great one.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
All right.